Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Brief. Of course, this is where we catch you up on the latest headlines in our industry. And boy, we've got quite a bit to talk about today. We've been off for a couple of weeks, but thank you for following our socials to stay in touch because we always share those headlines, even if we can't be here in person due to travels and customer appointments and so forth. But we're excited to be back today. And let's start right at the top. Bret, the news, of course, is highlighting this topic we've been talking about for months on end, tirelessly. Of course,
T word again.
The T word.
Yeah. I mean,
Tariffs.
Tomorrow's a big day. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we're going to see the resolution that many of us are looking for, that tariffs would be ruled illegal. Mm-hmm. There's a lot at stake in that decision, mainly financial. Mm-hmm. The U.S. government has brought in about $1 trillion more in extra taxes paid for by the U.S. consumer. But the Supreme Court's going to look at it tomorrow.
November 5th.
Or November 5th, correct.
Yes.
The two arguments are Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump and Trump versus VOS selections. It really challenges the legality of President Trump using emergency powers to lay in these tariffs. It has been a wild roller coaster ride of tariffs since January or really April of this year. Mm-hmm. And many of us in the import business have been really kind of riding that roller coaster, and it's not been a fun ride. Right. And so tomorrow it comes to a head. I think that behind the scenes we have to be, looking at, what the challengers are arguing, that they're using this key legal question about this kind of Emergency Economic Powers Act, i.e. EPA. Mm-hmm. And the challengers are saying, look, it doesn't mention tariffs, duties, or taxes. Congress is usually the one that historically imposes these strict limits. And then, the question is, are we using this particular act to bypass trade laws, which constitutes unconstitutional executive overreach?
Right. So if this is deemed legal or acceptable, then that would actually change some of the opinions about what's constitutionally correct.
Well, we'll see what the Supreme Court does. I would tell you they're probably a little nervous. This is a big decision to be made, because if they do rule that it's legal, or that the president has the powers to do that, they really do redefine the limits of executive authority and trade and taxation. Right. And that I think becomes a little bit challenging. Tariffs then kind of get solidified. I think, though, even if we see, from what many of us believe could be a positive reply from the Supreme Court, there are a number of other things that the administration could enact to keep tariffs in place. Okay. So I would tell you that
it's not going away.
I don't think it's going away. We didn't have a removal of tariffs even during the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. We are deeply in debt as a country. This is a consumer import use tax, thinly veiled as, trade balance, and penalties for fentanyl. That's not really what this is all about. I think it really is refilling some of the coffers and creating unique taxation. And therefore, I think we should be braced that costs are going to be up across the board for imported goods, and that we should be looking somewhere around 15 to 20%, of the cost of those goods at a tariff level. The big thing to always remember is that tariffs are on top of duties that are taxes placed on import of goods that have never gone away. So this is a compounded tax on top of it. So I think, as we all see when we go to the grocery store, we're buying items today, even though that some of it's been mitigated, we are seeing higher costs. I think we need to brace ourselves for higher costs. I think the government's like, if you don't want to spend the money, buy less.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's a really winning argument, but I think we should be planned that as long as this administration is in place, and frankly, perhaps the next administration, seeing the benefit of that taxation and reducing our deep debt, we should probably believe that there is going to be this level of tariff that's going to be in place.
Stay around. Okay.
So let's not get our hopes up too high.
Yeah.
But whatever happens tomorrow is going to be the longer term implication.
Okay. All right. As we're looking at our global supply chain, key area for apparel production is Bangladesh. Right now, they're experiencing a energy crisis that is impacting the level of production that they can actually support us with these days.
Yeah, and this is not new for
Okay.
Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a large producer of goods to the U.S. I think 30% of their community or exports are in apparel, 30% of the GDP, something like that. So it's a very important sector for them. But the infrastructure for Bangladesh has always been plagued by one thing or another, and they've had a rough go of it over the last number of years. They've had political instability. I think that sometimes that erodes some of the internal infrastructure. And they're seeing lots of issues with power outages in factories, especially mills, knitting mills and weaving mills are terrible. It will screw things up. But then you've got a lot of this productivity issues, and factories are really facing 3 to 4 hours of daily production shutting, where they've got to shut down. And so they're missing shipping deadlines. It really is hitting the majority of small and medium factories. Some of the larger ones have their own infrastructure to keep things going. But I think it's an issue. I think there needs to be a big holistic approach to that fix. But, out of all the countries I've traveled to, Bangladesh has its massive share of problems, and so we'll see if they can solve that.
So help me understand, if a power outage happens, while fabric is getting knitted or woven, or some part of the garment is going through a sewing machine, at that moment that power outage happens, how does that affect the fabric or the garment? Is it
depends on the different machinery, depends on what happens, because power outages do happen, but sometimes it can create flaws. The starting up of the machine, getting the tension back into that machine and then having it shut down. There's increased wastage that happens due to those. And in the sewing machines, you're really screwing up the production line flow. Sometimes you'll have to, re-filter that garment through and restitch it. But it really, in the mills, the dyeing houses, all those things tend to be really hard hit by power outages.
Okay. All right. So again, now looking at another story, that's another part of the supply chain, looking to El Salvador, which we've had some experience with. There is a Korean Giant Sae A Trading, which has purchased a major player in Los Angeles, Swiss Techs, and they're doing this to really strengthen their position in North America.
Yeah, the Koreans in Central America have always had a very strong position. They were the first to kind of go down to Central America, establish manufacturing and production in that region. And I would say out of many of the Asian cultures, Korea has always been really aggressive in that respect by picking up and moving technology and manpower and workers to rebuild or build new opportunities in different countries. So they've long been in Central America. I think this is a strategic purchase for them. Swiss Techs is a very large operation. It employs about 500 people in their U.S. and El Salvadorian production. And it really is this whole kind of approach to nearshoring, and then it still follows under CAFTA. And so this is kind of a confusing landscape because you're like, wow, CAFTA is all duty free.
Trade,
but what about tariffs? So this is that whole conversation that we talk about, that we have two levels of taxation. We have duties that have always been in place and have never gone away, and they range mainly from around, let's say, 19% to 32%, depending on the fabrication and the garment and things like that. And that is of the cost of the garment that, U.S. consumers ultimately pay. And then tariffs are that second layer.
So
Well, CAFTA
previously, right?
would have wiped away all the duties that have been in place. And when there was a world of no tariffs, that was duty-free coming in. And what
Yeah.
that would do would stimulate our neighboring countries, grow economic viability, provide more workforce down there so that they would stem the flight of migrants north, it would provide good economies,
Yeah, a lot
build
of layers of benefit.
partnerships. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits. So today in El Salvador, we're still going to be paying the tariff tax level
That
of
15%.
15%, but that base 20 to 32% has still not
Yeah.
is not in place now. So there's still a benefit.
There still
right?
is a benefit, and it
Yeah.
sounds like SEA is really looking to boost efficiency by investing in technology, which we talk about,
Yep.
being
Every day
the
this
future of our
business is-
industry.
yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see that development.
And it's proximity too, the ability to react to business. As things get more expensive, one way to cut costs and make sure that you're more profitable on items is to ensure that you're buying closer to the vest, you're buying tighter to the vest, to ensure that you don't have lots of over excess stock. Those markdowns decrease profitability. So if you can have manufacturing closer and react better within the season, that offsets some of the increased costs that could be happening.
Further innovation that we've talked about in the industry is whole garment knitting. And now we're looking at 3D printed shoes. So this is like a new evolution of migrating from just bringing technology into the actual making process. Companies like Adidas and Nike are really looking at this as a future of production for them.
Yeah, for sure. And every day technology continues along that spectrum as technology does, where they're finding new solutions to ensure that they can move this whole printing method along the path for textiles or textile-like products. And shoes is no exception. Zellerfield, they're based in Germany. They use a filament-based 3D printing method using thermoplastic polyurethane. And in the past, they just produced 3D print the midsoles.
Right.
Now the entire
whole
shoe is being printed. And so, I think that there's definitely a trend in that. There's less manual labor, more robotic labor, full 3D
no
printing.
waste, right?
Really no waste.
Yeah.
I think the big challenge that we continue to look, the challenges that remain is that it's still somewhat of a costly program. And that it's difficult to scale. But I would tell you the way that technology moves, the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to solve that. You're going to start seeing a lot more rapid production and scalability. The costs will come down as all technology continues to do. So it's definitely something to be looking forward to. And in a trend of uniqueness, custom products, the great thing about 3D printing is that if you have that base model in, because there's a lot of complexity in creating the base model for 3D printing. But once the shoe's in, the decoration, the coloration, some of the uniqueness of that can be manipulated so that you've got some customization.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the evolution of material sciences as this comes into play more universally. I think that that's an area of real opportunity to bring substances that are friendlier to the earth and so forth. So I think that that'll be really exciting.
Thermoplastic polyurethane is not super
so friendly, right?
So another shout out to our friends at Ciclo. Hopefully they can figure out a way to partner with this group so that we can have some great biodegradability in this respect too.
Absolutely. Well, as always, we kind of like to keep our last story a little bit fun and a little bit more fashion focused. And right now, the world is buzzing about the exhibition at the Palais Galleria, the Fashion Museum in Paris, Temple of Love, the Rick Owens exhibition. We were lucky enough while we were traveling to be able to personally experience this exhibit. And wow, it really showcases the art of fashion, that fashion itself is art.
Yeah, it was an interesting week in Paris. We were there a little over a week ago, I guess, 2 weeks ago. We had Art Basel and then the Palais Galleria's exhibit at Rick Owens. And what's exciting is that even in elements of Art Basel and at Pele Galleria, we are celebrating apparel as art.
Mm.
And we've always talked that designers are artists. They paint with cloth, not brushes. But we're seeing it here. We're seeing this evolution. And when you walked through Rick Owens' exhibit, you were hit with a lot of different thoughts and emotions, but it was awe-inspiring, and it really drew on, this spiritual ritual, the underground culture. They talked about the longtime relationship and collaborator with his wife, Michelle Lemmy.
And you really saw the influence. Like he
Yeah.
worked for her atelier before
In Los Angeles.
Yes,
yeah.
before he was of his own brand. And it was really fascinating to see her influence on his aesthetic. I really think that the two of them are such a perfect marriage, because they almost are like one person.
Yeah. And you went room to room. There were over 100 different garments, this unbelievable sort of, maybe don't phrase it well, about kind of post-apocalyptic, I mean, almost religious sort of feeling garments. It was definitely Rick Owens, an homage to Rick Owens, and it was really interesting.
Absolutely. So if you're in Paris, we encourage you to see it. That exhibition is up through January 2026.
Yeah.
Completely worth the visit.
Yeah.
You really get an insight of what inspires his collections, his designs, and it will stick with you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us this week for the headlines that have transpired over this last week. And do not forget to subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming episodes of our longer format Clothing Culture podcast. And we will meet you right back here next week.